Hello, this evening we're going to do some more of our English practices. Today, before we dive into our main topic, let's say something about our weather. We can see that the sky has this color which reminds us of Batman because of the grayness of the sky, kind of like what we've seen from the previous days. That's why I said that it reminded me of Batman, where if you have the comics and you don't want people to stop reading because the color is too bright, the contrast between white and black is too bright. You gotta tone it down such that the color would be a little bit gray, and the kids would still continue on reading and buying the comics now. Now I said kids, but actually I think even grown-ups still read the Batman comics. Although I was saying I think this was in Japanese class, there's this sense that if you grew up in one of those uh, periods of television programming where you get to see the Batman in live action on TV, and there's Robin there together with him, and he was not really wearing like gray cape or gray cowl at all, but kind of like blue. That Batman, I think you have this impression that he's too good. What I mean by that, he can always solve the problem. It's like they create the story in such a way that Joker, for example, has caught the Batman and Robin, and it's like they're gonna die, but they always find a way to solve the trap. And I think gradually people began to like Joker more. And so maybe that's why they thought, I think we gotta stop this because the the audience are preferring the villain more than the heroes. And I think this reminds me also of what is this cartoons before when we were growing up. I think I was saying in Japanese class something about the Mighty Mouse. Yes, the Mighty Mouse, where the wolves seem to have this big problem that they can't do anything with Mighty Mouse at all. Whenever he comes, he just cleans up the mess that these guys are doing, and they can't they can't win against the Mighty Mouse. And so I think in that sense too, gradually people began to want to take down the Mighty Mouse. So they're now on the side of the enemy, right? And so I think a lot of people began to see that the television, the cartoons, really influences the minds of the audience too. Because, for example, in this new video of Mr. Okamoto Yoshiki, he's sharing something that he has found in Malaysia, and it's saying that from the title, it's about um, the water big lizard. It's a big lizard that lives in the water, and it's something that you can find in Malaysia. Now we know that the lizard is something that we can find here too in the Philippines. But I think what I do remember more would be the crocodiles, the alligators in Mindanao. So I think these types of reptiles are quite prevalent here in Southeast Asia. Of course, in other parts of the world too. But definitely, I think if you're into these reptiles, you can find quite a number of them here in the Philippines and in other Southeast Asian countries too. Now, the other thing is, I was saying the influence of TV to their audience is, for example, the one of the assignments that the textbook that we had for Chinese Mandarin was telling us was, there's this story about the the drawing of the reptile, which is supposedly a snake, and the assignment was the children have to draw this snake, but it turned out that I think they drew the snake, but they added the feet. And so we want to know, why did you add the feet? I mean, it's supposed to be a snake. So, so I think it's also because maybe their idea is, this is what we see on cartoons, this is what we see on TV. We think that this is a snake. And I think also that the book was explaining, because we used the textbook and the textbook had the story. The textbook was saying that there are times when people add stuff that aren't really necessary, and because of that, it destroys the actual thing that you're supposed to draw, right? You have to draw a snake, but it turns out it's not a snake, but a lizard. So something about that. Oh, by the way, I now remember this part in Mr. Okamoto's video where he says so we do remember the sounds that people can make just with their voice. And I think quite a number of games from the past did use this type of sounds, because I mean, if you can't find an object that you can use an instrument, a musical instrument, to create the sounds, then it looks like you have to do it on your own, with your own mouth, with your own capabilities. So things like what else can we remember? Like I think maybe it's like that, or I think there was something much more interesting. Like, it reminded me of Red Alert. Really reminded me of Red Alert. The Command and Conquer game. Maybe it's really like that. So you can just go and do that, and sometimes people don't really differentiate whether it's the actual sound or not, as long as they can experience that they're winning or something like that, right? But of course, I think eventually people began to create something that is much closer to much more like the actual. So they go out and find where an actual gun could be fired, and so you have the sound there. But I think there are still people who would rather just improvise and use whatever they can to create the sound, like in the Capcom videos. I think I remember seeing a Capcom video where they were showing that one of the employees there, his job was really to just make sounds. So what is a sound for hitting a girl, for example? I mean, hitting one of the girl characters there. This is in they create all these girl characters, and I know this is all virtual, but actually, yes, if you think about it, it's something that's worrisome for people, I guess. But for the people who play the game, it seems like it doesn't really matter. I mean, this is virtual stuff. You in real life, you don't hit someone like that, but in this game, it's okay. So I think it doesn't really have that sense that I mean, if you say it, you hit the girl, it's like bad. But in this case, if you're playing the game, doesn't really matter, right? And we can see that it doesn't matter based on the sales. People seem to be buying the game, right? And I know, I think um, there are much more realistic games like the Mortal Kombat games, where you have a lot of these women there and people hitting one each other, and I think some of those scenes too, where you like you break the bones or something like that, and people seem to be okay with it. No one seems to be complaining too much about how they can be kind of violent in that sense, right? So I think influence definitely comes from television, comes from video games, but if you got someone to explain to you what exactly is happening here, and that's why we do have like the parental guidance or something like that, where it tells you that this game or this television program has to be watched by a guardian or something like that. And so that part about explaining things is important. Now I remember now one of the videos that came out this evening from Instituto Cervantes about the languages that people are learning and how Spanish, for example, can compete against English, German, and French. It seems like it's really quite difficult to compete with English because the instruction for students usually starts first with English, right? So if you can't speak English at, I mean, from the very start, you can't go up and learn another language like Spanish. So it seems like the majority of people would have to still first learn English and then they go to Spanish. So in that sense, they can't get much more students right away if they all have to have the English proficiency beforehand and then move on to Spanish, right? But I think it's also something that in a few years, like for example, in my case, started really studying English. I say really studying, but really it was reading, really reading English novels just for my own leisure. It's not something that was required by school, because if you read the stuff that school required, I think some of them, like for example, in high school, we would have to read some of the Shakespeare books, and I think if you, I mean, you can read it, but can you use the words there out loud? Say those words out loud, and I think that's why the school was kind of adding more of the like the explanation to why we have to read the Shakespeare via a movie where you got Romeo and Juliet and they were speaking out the lines, and it seems like it was okay, right? So I think that was one of the explanations, I think, that they came up with to say that we gotta learn Shakespeare now, even though it seems like no one seems to be talking this way. But in my case, I did read particularly fantasy novels from the Sword of Truth series, and it was mostly just because I wanted to read it, and in that way I improved my vocabulary. And so I was putting more and more time to reading the stuff. Like in a whole day, that's the only thing that I do. Maybe like 8 hours, because I didn't have anything else to do. I just read the whole thing, and in that way I could finish the book maybe 1 or 2 weeks or so. I think if you got like 20 minutes for 4 pages, and you got what, 300 pages, if we do the math, how long is it gonna take? Let me see if I can actually compute. But the point here is that I think I was adding more and more words in my vocabulary list, because before that I wasn't reading at all as much, except the stuff that we were required to read. So for example, Um, if I if it's 300 pages and I could read 4 pages for 20 minutes, okay, this would amount to 25. Um, so it's um, about a little bit over 2 weeks, I think. I'll need to do the computations again to see if I'm getting it right. So 300 pages, and then um, if I'm reading four pages per 20 minutes, okay, and then we just make this. I think I was doing the divide by 3, so that would be an hour. So 25. No, this one could be done in about 1 day. You read the whole thing in 1 day if you have 25 hours, right? But I don't have that time. I only have 8 hours per day, for example. So that would be like a few days, maybe a week, just a week or so. Less than a week, you can finish the whole thing if it's 300 pages. And if it's the only thing that you'll be doing. So, in that way, I think in my Spanish language practices, I've been adding reading and reading and reading, and that's, I think, something that I definitely need. And so um, I think that's one way that we can move things much faster for people who are learning the language if they read. But of course, when I was reading the books, I didn't have a lot of practice time speaking, so my speaking wasn't really that good. And it was only when I got to Japan for the exchange program that I started to really speak much more than before, but still not so much because I think it was after that when I started teaching the Japanese language that really, like, every day or almost every day I had to speak, explain stuff that really got me to improve much faster. And I think that's also what I'm doing with the other languages, where I talk about whatever I'm watching, whatever I'm reading, and in that way, that's practice for me. But I think not a lot of people still do that, so it's taking them a little bit more time to get their speaking level to a much higher proficiency. Okay, so I think that's enough. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see each other